Tonight we begin with an announcement that political observers, civil rights leaders, and administration insiders had anticipated, debated, and quietly prepared for. An announcement that unfolded not over weeks, but in a single day that intensified a national debate, a single day that raised the temperature on an already divided issue, a single day that pushed a familiar public figure back into the spotlight. What Melania Trump did today crossed into territory that many in Washington had hoped would remain untouched. And when that line was crossed, the political conversation did not hesitate. It responded with emotion, criticism, and renewed urgency. For months now, there have been signals, not official White House briefings, not formal campaign announcements, just public appearances, carefully worded statements, and subtle shifts in tone that Melania Trump is preparing something more direct. She has been private, yes, but she has also been deliberate in her privacy. Her public reappearances have followed a certain pattern, a measured pattern, almost a strategic pattern. But what set off alarm bells in political circles this week was that the pattern went silent. Commentators who monitor public messaging know the indicators: the absence of scheduled appearances, the lack of social media activity, the pause in previously routine engagements, the sudden shift in media speculation. All of that went quiet. And whenever a high-profile political figure goes quiet, it often means something significant is about to get loud. Early this morning, media outlets detected what they described as a coordinated release of messaging, including language that had not been used by Melania Trump in years. These are the kinds of public statements she only delivers when signaling something very specific: concern, positioning, or a broader appeal beyond politics. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Melania Trump was changing her posture. And when a figure known for distance from daily political fights shifts posture without explanation, even by a small measure, Washington pays attention. The message issued today was not routine. It was not ceremonial. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Sources familiar with the political landscape describe Melania Trump's move as deliberate, emotionally framed, and perhaps most importantly, timed to a moment of visible national strain. But messaging only works if the audience hesitates. The public did not. In fact, the reaction today was among the swiftest we've seen in this ongoing immigration debate. Here's what we know. Within hours of her appeal for unity amid anti-IC protests, political leaders, advocacy groups, and commentators responded. These weren't routine reactions. These were national-level responses, statements, interviews, and rapid media analysis that only emerge when the stakes feel high. Tonight, analysts confirmed that Melania Trump's statement focused on national unity, public safety, and compassion, themes that place her message at the intersection of law enforcement, immigration policy, and civil unrest. She addressed the climate surrounding protests tied to immigration and customs enforcement, including tensions that had recently escalated in multiple cities. She emphasized calm. She emphasized dialogue. She emphasized the need for Americans to remember shared values during moments of conflict. In other words, she targeted the emotional center of a political storm, the part that shapes perception, the part that influences tone. This is what made the moment so notable. Her message wasn't policy, it was atmosphere. It represented an attempt to cool a national mood that many believe is overheating. And the reaction, understanding that fully, responded with intensity, not uniformly, not quietly, but passionately. Supporters praised the call for unity. Critics questioned the timing. And here's where the story becomes even more complex. Some analysts believe this move was designed to reframe the conversation around immigration protests, shifting it from enforcement versus resistance to unity versus division. The goal may have been to see whether the public discourse could be redirected toward civility. But instead, the opposite also happened. The statement didn't silence debate. It amplified it. Commentators didn't ignore the message. They dissected it. They evaluated its tone, its timing, and its political implications so thoroughly that it dominated headlines within hours. You don't capture national attention easily in a crowded media cycle. But today, this did. Political analysts speaking on background described the shift as narrative repositioning, a way to change emotional framework without entering legislative specifics. But critics argue that tone without policy can feel incomplete. Supporters argue that tone is exactly what the country needs. That contrast matters because it shows something important. This isn't just a policy debate anymore. It's a cultural and emotional one. AS reports continue throughout the day. We learn more about the scale of the response. Advocacy groups issued statements urging deeper policy change. Law enforcement voices highlighted the risks officers face during escalating protests. Civil rights organizations renewed calls for immigration reform and accountability. This wasn't just a reaction to a speech. This wasn't just another political soundbite. This was a flashpoint moment. This was a narrative collision. And narrative control is the one thing every political movement struggles to maintain during unrest. For every call for calm, there's a call for action. For every plea for unity, there's a demand for justice. Remember, many believed immigration tensions would gradually fade from the headlines. They thought protest energy would slow. They thought the issue would retreat into legislative negotiations. But tonight, the opposite is happening. The streets remain active. The debate remains loud. The political stakes remain high. What makes this moment so sensitive and so volatile is that this appeal came at a time when national leaders across the spectrum are under pressure. Some want stricter enforcement. Some want sweeping reform. Some want immediate de-escalation. Others want sustained protest. And leaders balancing those demands while managing public safety know every word carries weight. When public figures step into that space, they're not doing it casually. They're doing it because the pressure is visible, because the tension is measurable, because silence begins to feel like absence. Official responses today made clear that authorities are focused on maintaining order while protecting constitutional rights. Statements emphasize that violence and destruction are unacceptable, while peaceful protest remains protected. Officials describe the current environment as deeply challenging and call for responsible leadership across the public sphere. That is diplomatic language for, the country is tense, and words matter right now. You don't usually hear that tone unless the stakes are real. Meanwhile, Melania Trump addressed the public in a measured, somber tone. She spoke about the pain communities feel during times of conflict. She spoke about the importance of respect. She spoke about the need for Americans to see one another not as enemies, but as neighbors. These were not policy proposals. They were emotional appeals from someone stepping briefly back into a divided national conversation. Here's what makes the situation more complicated. The protests themselves are not isolated. Along with demonstrations tied to ICE, local leaders are navigating public safety concerns. Community groups are organizing large-scale rallies. Online rhetoric has intensified across political lines. All of this is happening at once. When multiple tensions rise simultaneously, it signals a broader national strain. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that this moment fades after tensions cool. Another is that it marks a new phase of louder, more visible immigration activism. A third possibility, the one worrying officials most, is that polarization deepens further. But today's message attempted to interrupt that trajectory. It didn't call for confrontation. It didn't call for escalation. It called for unity. What we're watching now is a test of national resilience. Protesters want to be heard. Leaders want stability. Communities want safety. Advocates want change. And all of it is unfolding in real time. Tonight, observers say demonstrations remain active but largely organized, with officials continuing to monitor developments. They say dialogue between local authorities and community leaders is ongoing. And they say today's unity message is likely part of a broader effort to influence tone rather than policy. But the response has not been silence. It has been conversation. Intense, emotional, and nationwide conversation. And that sends a message of its own, that Americans are deeply engaged. Even when they disagree, as the days go on, we expect more clarity about where this moment leads. But what we do know is that today's appeal was timely. It attempted to lower the temperature. It aimed to remind people of shared ground. It tried to slow a cycle of escalation. What happens next depends on what unfolds in the streets, in communities, and in the national dialogue. If tensions cool, this moment may be remembered as a turning point in tone. If they rise, leaders have already shown they're preparing for a long conversation. And tonight, for the first time in days, the national spotlight feels fixed. The streets are active. The debate is louder than ever. And when the country grows this tense, it means something larger is being decided. Because tonight, America is being reminded of something it has learned many times before. Division is powerful. Emotion is powerful. But unity, when it happens, can be powerful too. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The conversation has shifted. The spotlight has widened. And the country is